There's a good chance most of you don't even know who Heidi McDonald is. She's supposed to be a journalist, a comic book journalist at that, keeping the integrity of the comic book industry, right? She used to be an editor, I believe, for DC Comics Vertigo line like decades ago. Now she's the front person for the Comics Beat, one of the really obscure comic book media sites that I don't think a lot of people really trust. Me personally, I don't even look at the site. When I'm looking for information that I want to talk about here on the channel, the Comics Beat is underneath CBR, Newsarama, and Screen Rant. That's how highly I think of the Comics Beat. The only thing I check out there is Tilting at Windmills from Brian Hibbs, a comic book retailer from California that has some pretty interesting analysis and insights into the comic book industry. I will check those out from time to time, but anything that says Heidi McDonald, I pretty much ignore. She's all about straw manning. She's all about gaslighting, never actually addressing what's going on with the comic book industry. Because if you don't know this, she's been championing all the stuff that's destroying comic books for the last decade. Heidi McDonald is one of the people behind that. She's been championing it. She's also notorious for being behind like all the whisper networks going on with comic books that are also helping destroy the comic book industry. I actually highlighted her several years ago, the first big video on my channel, talking about how she was one of the people that was really destroying comic books. I do check out a few comic book YouTube channels pretty much daily, one of them being Comics Matter with your boy Zach. And that's the only reason I know to talk about this. The end of her articles, now she has decided to argue with people using gaslighting, using straw man techniques, and basically ignoring the actual things that are being said about the comic book industry. We've been saying manga is pantsing the traditional comic book market in North America. Actually, DC and Marvel are no longer mainstream comics in North America. Manga is. Almost all of that is based on adult graphic novel sales, which everyone has admitted for like 3 years now at least, that manga is killing DC and Marvel, and DC and Marvel need to learn from manga. No one has ever said graphic novel sales were bad in North America. It's the most insane thing. You're probably going, Wes, what the hell are you talking about? As I mentioned, she likes to gaslight, strawman people at the end of her articles. This came out in the adult graphic novel sales rose 4.6% in 2022 article. And this, my friends, is world-class strawmanning. Supposedly, a real comic book journalist says this. All of this really backs up my thoughts on why we need sales charts. Reading Twitter and seeing the collective sense of unease in the industry would make you think that sales were in the toilet in 2022. Granted, of late, there's been a lot of unsettling news with the dismantling of Comixology among the most unsettling. However, 2022 was a good year for adult graphic novel sales, and don't let anyone tell you any different. Who has said anything different? I've done multiple videos right here on the channel. I have seen other people do videos that talk about comic books on YouTube, talking about adult graphic novel sales are amazing. You know what's not amazing? Graphic novel sales for traditional comic book publishers in North America, notably DC and Marvel. The comic book market is actually blowing up in America right now, yet Marvel and DC are not seeing an increase in their sales. That's what we're saying the problem is, Heidi McDonald. No one in their right mind would ever say manga sales are slipping. They broke records in 2021 and likely in 2022 as well. No one ever has said manga sales are starting to dip and adult graphic novel sales just aren't what they used to be. They're at an all-time high right now. This is what she says previously in the article. Adult graphic novel sales rose 4.6% in stores that report to MPD Bookscan. Jim Elliott reports in a paywalled story on Publishers Weekly. Since this is the adult list we're talking about, it is safe to assume that most of those sales were manga. We are working on the annual MPD Bookscan chart for graphic novels with analysis by Brian Hibbs, even as we speak. So we're able to drill down a lot more of these numbers in the coming months. But it's fair to say that graphic novel sales were strong in 2022, even as overall book sales fell by 6.5%. Yes, there's a growing demand for graphic novel content for comic books in North America, and DC and Marvel are missing out on all of this. There are some indie publishers that are doing better. Image is certainly doing better than they were 5 years ago. Boom is doing much better than they were 5 years ago. Dark Horse, maybe about even. IDW, absolutely not. They've tanked. And I'll tell you right here on this channel, I'm glad that comic sales are up in North America, that somebody at least is buying comic books, but I'm here to actually champion traditional North American comic books, superhero comics, DC, Marvel, Image, stuff like that. I actually don't want this niche little hobby that we have here to die out in North America and just be dominated by manga worldwide. I would actually like to see comic shops in North America, you know, those mom and pop businesses that depend on DC and Marvel, to maybe make a little coin based on selling comic books sometime in the next decade. But that is not happening. Almost every single comic book shop retailer I hear from, and I do hear from a lot of them, have all changed their business model over the last 3 to 5 years. Some of them are doing back issues because they can't sell new comic books. Some of them are specializing in exclusive retailer variant covers or just variant covers from the publishers themselves. Some of them just put the comic books way back in the back and they sell shirts and tchotchkes and tabletop gaming now because nobody wants to read Marvel comics because of what Marvel specifically had done for the last decade, being championed by idiots like Heidi McDonald who want to act like they don't know what we're saying. There was a time when no brand in the world was hotter than Marvel. Nothing from manga was as hot as the MCU. There was more interest in Captain America, Thor, Hulk, Spider-Man, the Avengers. Every single character, Iron Man, associated with Marvel Comics was as hot as can be. And what did Marvel Comics do? Being championed by idiots like Heidi McDonald, let's kill them all off. Let's remove them from the publisher and replace them with newer, younger, more diverse versions of the characters because we need to find a modern audience. Of course, that was at the expense of the current audience that they actually had. And guess what? When the normies came in that were interested in the characters from the movie universe, they came in and they said, why the fuck is Falcon Captain America? Who the hell is Riri Williams? Totally awesome bro Hulk. How about totally fuck off? I don't want to see any of these characters. Why would I pay for this? And they walked away, and you missed out on the hottest boom period in the history of comic books, potentially. And now DC Comics are following down the exact same path. They're trying to replace all their characters. Actually, they're not replacing them. They're just making duplicate new versions of the same characters they already have for a new, more modern, diverse audience. Guess what? They aren't showing up because they forgot to hire good writers where they were added. They decided they needed to cast the writers based on the surface traits, sexuality, and gender identities of the fucking characters. Never ever thinking about whether the person could write a comic book story. Are you kidding me? We've been talking about this for 5 fucking years now. Some people like Zach Angleteed, obviously Doug Ernst, have been talking about it even longer. We've never said manga wasn't hot. We never said there was no interest in comic books. We've been talking about the death of the North American comic book industry. We are seeing comic book shops go out of business left and right, and idiots like Heidi McDonald and her ilk that are trying to control comic books behind the scenes are the main reason this is happening. This is not the only time she decided to use a logical fallacy on the readers, as if people from Comicsgate really read the Comics Beat. But this was what she said at the end of her More About Comic Book sales charts. This discussion also drew out comments directed at me from that faction of the comics reading audience that believes that diversifying the readership and creators of Big Two comics has killed the comics, while ignoring the other distribution, demographic, and physical challenges to that market segment. It is impossible to have a conversation with these folks because they have a cult-like mindset based on getting their info from the MSM-like entities that profit off their insecurities. It's sad, but ironically, by championing crowdfunding campaigns of various types that do have gaudy numbers associated with them, this crowd has ample reasons to feel proud of their success. That is the textbook definition of gaslighting. That is absolutely insane. That is supposed to be journalism. That's how seriously Heidi McDonald and the Comics Beat take journalism in comic books. Diversifying the readership isn't the problem. Even diversifying the creators isn't the problem. We actually need to find new readers if this hobby, if this business is actually going to grow. And I certainly have a vested interest in that happening. But they did it at the expense of the people that were already there. They did it at the expense of lifelong readers. And they did it while destroying everything people had been coming to the dance for 80 years in the process. There's nothing wrong with having a more diverse set of creators, but you actually have to find, I don't know, comic book writers, not essayists from The Atlantic. not screenwriters from Hollywood that have one credit to their name anyone has ever heard of. They go out of their way to go and find the worst writers possible that have a social message that they need to cram into the comic books at the expense of the characters and the stories. If you don't believe that is one of the reasons people have noped out of North American comic books and yet right into manga, you are absolutely insane. But she knows all this stuff is right. But Heidi McDonald is a key reason why all of this is happening. And do you think somebody with an ego like Heidi McDonald could ever actually admit they were wrong, despite all the evidence that the comic book industry in North America is in dire straits right now? And when I say comic book industry, I'm talking about comic book publishers and local comic shops. I'm talking about the businesses that rely on this. I'm talking about the mass exodus away from comic books. We've been talking about this for a very long time. They had the opportunity to make Marvel Comics mainstream, and in turn, likely DC Comics and the entire comic book reading ventures of superheroes into the mainstream, part of the social consciousness, things that people consume on a daily basis. People like the MCU. They're turning away from it now, and they missed their window. They never realized how important digital was. You know what comic books doesn't have? They don't have a diversity problem with the readership. They really don't even have a diversity problem with the heroes. There are plenty of diverse heroes in both universes. There's actually quite a diverse readership if you look at the numbers themselves. You know why comic books are being held back? You know why Marvel and DC aren't growing right now? Yes, all the changes that they've made have been a big time issue, and it's driven the current readership away. The reason they can't find new readership is an accessibility problem. People don't know where to find the product. Digital comics are the new spinner rack for new readers. Example being what they've done with manga in Japan, the Shonen Jump app. DC and Marvel had a chance to take the bull by the horns, and they let it die, and we're seeing what's happening with Comixology. That is absolutely a big-time fail by mainstream U.S. comic book publishers, and you reap what you sow. If you can only see 2 inches in front of your face, you will never, ever see the future of the industry, and it is going to die a slow, disgusting death that we're all experiencing right now. And Heidi McDonald is absolutely a part of that. There is an accessibility problem with comic books for new readers, but now there's a major quality problem, so even if they did show up, none of them would ever stay because the characters suck now and the stories suck for the most part. Yes, there are some exceptions, and we try to highlight those here every single week here on the channel, and we try to talk about the good stuff, but there's so much bad, it pretty much overwhelms all the good stuff. And you know why the bad stuff is here? Because of idiots like Heidi McDonald who want to sit there and gaslight people and use straw man arguments instead of actually listening to the feedback they're getting. And don't think that she's the only one. It's CB Cebulski, it's Jim Lee, it's the leadership at DC, it's the leadership at Marvel. We're getting gaslit and straw man by CBR, Newsarama, Screen Rant, anyone that really covers comic books. It is very difficult to find honest commentary about the comic book industry. Things are not good right now. In fact, that little thing she talked about with Brian Hibbs, those MPD sales numbers, I actually talked about it last year. This is the scariest stuff you'll ever see in your life if you love DC and Marvel Comics. This is how bad it was in 2021, and it's going to be worse in 2022. I guarantee it. I can't wait to see those numbers because I want to break them down again. Can't see the video here. There's also a link in the video description.